Hello there, I'm Sean BW Parker, and here for Empowering the Innocent and for as the writer and artist in my own right. And we're talking to Mr. Richard Vobes today, the famous man from the freedom movement, and as a TV historian as well, and others which he won't want me to box him into. And we're very much here together today, asking him questions and possibly him answering, discussing a little bit. Hi, Richard.
Hello, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. In this fantastic studio we find ourselves in.
Yes, this is a studio. It's actually it's the master bedroom of a 2-up, 2-down terraced house. Maybe I shouldn't say that. It's glorious commercial premises with wonderful staff. No, it's just me and something I knocked together.
It's a wonderful place to be.
Thank you.
Lots of people, including me, of course, over the last year or so, have been captivated by your material, in the sense that there's lots of people who used to know you from the 90s in the mainstream television world of historianism and also the children's books and things like this, things that maybe you can tell us about. That's gone through a bit of a journey over recent years. Do you want to give us a brief little history about what happened?
Well, I was... Let's see, depending on where one starts. I was sort of I've never been really mainstream in terms of television, other than a children's television series I had in the mid-90s. And I wanted to be in television all my life. I've been keen on film, audio, things like that since a kid. But I found it very, very difficult until the mid-90s. I made a pilot for a children's television comedy, which was shown in 96 and 97 on the ITV network, which was very nice, but still battled really to get taken seriously. So tried to get into the mainstream telly. That didn't really work. Kept coming up with ideas. People kept saying, oh, your ideas are great, but it doesn't quite fit on our platform on Sky or BBC or any of these. In retrospect, I'm very pleased now because of where we are and what's going on in the world and the way that mainstream media is now frowned on by people in the know, shall we say. And so because I couldn't make it there, and I was doing all sorts of other things as an entertainer and doing corporate videos and things like that, I started to make videos, sort of documentary length about England. And these were being shown on Sky Television on the platform of Sky, on something at the time. It was called the Community Channel, which was supposedly there to give me a television credit and to give me exposure. I moved swiftly to YouTube because I could have more immediacy, more control, and spent a lot of the time making videos about landscape, heritage and nature, which is what I've been doing up until this time pretty much last year.
What time was that?
What time was what? Last year?
Yeah.
Mid-November it was.
Mid-November.
Yeah.
Did something happen or?
Yeah, so I was just doing very basic sort of ordinary, safe stuff about the beauty of England, how we should protect it, the wonderful old country houses, the nature, walking around footpaths, explaining about forests and woodland and pasture, and decrying how farming had gone bad, and sadly looking at new builds taking up the space. And that's still a passion of me, of worrying about what's happening to England, particularly because I feel very much an Englishman. And then one day I was watching GB News. Neil Oliver from Coast is one of the presenters there now. And we'd gone into the fuel crisis a year ago, and all the fuel had gone up and people were very finding it very difficult to pay their bills. And he said, what would happen if people just didn't pay? And I made a video really something very simple and a bit different to what I was normally doing. I sat on my little chair downstairs and just set the camera up and said, is he right? What would happen if we didn't pay? Now, ordinarily, my landscape, heritage and nature stuff would get perhaps 3,000 to 5,000 views over a week. In about 3 days, I had 100,000 views to that one video, Is He Right? And I thought, bloody hell, that's a bit strange. And so I started to do more of that, questioning what was happening, why the government, who's supposedly our servants, supposedly on our side, was doing bad stuff to us. And as the year has gone on, I realised more and more that the policies that they keep coming out with and the acts and the statutes are actually incredibly anti-human. And if you were a bunch of people on this planet deciding to form a government who was there for your benefit, you certainly wouldn't design what we have now. Because what we have now is, as I say, is anti-human. It's a penal system. It's a monetary-based system. It's incorporated, so they're businesses. The government is a for-profit business to extract as much money out of working people, or every man and woman in the country, and is not really there for our benefit at all. And yet we, man and woman, created government to administer things for us, so they should be beneath us. If you create something, the creator is never greater than the creator. But this created thing is a monster now, in my opinion, and it doesn't matter who you vote for, you're still going to get all the horrible things that they want to get. Push forward.
Right. So when you were talking about Mr. Neil Oliver, who is now with the GB News, as I believe, and
yeah, probably not for too much longer, I should think.
And the relationship that you've had with the mainstream media in the past to now, and he had, we presume, though he's not here, of course, but we know exactly what you mean. How does the relationship with the media affect people like you and him, and how does that relationship work? Because it's not a fall, it's a leap, isn't it?
So in what way do you mean? I mean, for me, the mainstream media, the television, terrestrial television, all the channels are effectively lying and programming us, forming a narrative that the everyday person feels has some sort of basis, as does the government. And of course, mainstream media is not free, as in free speech. It's curtailed. You can't talk about certain things. And we saw all of that during the pandemic. We saw how if you started to question the narrative, you were shut down. Cancel culture, as you know, is rife at the moment. If you don't follow the same opinion as the government or the woke agenda, or any of that, the feminist agenda, whatever it might be, if you're questioning and you just have a different opinion, it isn't necessarily that you think they're wrong, it's just that you have a different opinion, you're very quickly shut down. And so you have places like YouTube and Odyssey, Rumble, which are other video platforms, and others who are trying to have a more open conversation, putting other opinions out there, other versions of narratives, which a discerning viewer can make their own mind up. You know, you're not saying this is it and there's no other course of action. But so I mean, I don't bother with the mainstream media. I've got revoked my BBC license. I don't have it. I don't watch the BBC. I don't have a television. In the studio, I've got, you can't see it here, but over there is a large television monitor. It's not connected to any television signal. No satellite, no this, that and the other. It's not even connected to the internet. All it can see is my monitoring camera when I'm recording my shows. That's the only television I've got. The rest are computers and stuff. And again, you can't see a whole studio, but there's a lot of antiquated equipment in here, including old Valve wirelesses, which also don't work and are not connected to anything. So I don't listen to mainstream media anymore.
No. This is what the studio should be like. This is perfect. This is how I was always imagining it, that it would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's It's a bit quirky, but it's mine and I love it, and it's, you know, it's a reflection of me. And you know, I'm of that age that I have one leg in the analog world, and I do have one leg in the, and in fact the studio is, you can't see it, but there's wirelesses here and an old reel-to-reel tape recorder just behind you to the side. That's very much analog. This side, where you've got digital camera, computers, LED lights and things, that's very much the digital side. So the studio inadvertently, not on purpose, represents the old world and the modern world. And I'm of that age where I remember making Super 8 films on film, where you used to cut and paste, worked in a sound studio for a very short space of time. Again, you used to splice EMI tape, spools of tape with splicing block, and join them together. We do it all digitally, and of course it's much quicker and more efficient, but the digital world has more nefarious capabilities attached to it, like with I haven't got one here, mobile phones, in which people can spy on you. They can listen to your conversations. They can take your biometrics without your well, it is with your consent, but you don't know you've consented. Everything's with your consent. You just don't know you've consented. So they take all of that because you've had to say yes, allow it to take my data, blah blah blah. And the digital world is very dangerous, and most people don't realise how dangerous it is. And of course, we're being pushed more and more into that digital world. So I stay clear from mainstream media, and present my shows here, where even though I have to go on YouTube to do it, which again is another controlled environment, so you can't say certain things. So if I'm talking about recent medications, I might refer to a medical treatment or something like that you've had to put in, because if you say anything against this particular medical intervention, you can get struck down or chucked off. And I've had 2 strikes on mainstream media. So it's none of we still don't have a free platform to say what you really want. But, you know, especially now the online safety bill's coming in, which will of course zip me even more.
What's going on inside the online safety bill that you can educate us more to? Everyone has an idea of it's going to stamp down people's speech, but
my understanding is that the online safety bill is to make sure that vulnerable people and children do not, and the great unwashed, do not get the wrong information. Basically, not the narrative that the government want you to have, that you don't have the wrong opinion. Because if you have the wrong opinion, you're getting misinformation. If you think, for example, a certain drug being pumped into you is not actually good for you, that might not be what the government want you to think in a crisis situation. They may want you to acquiesce to their designs. Now, you may have a different opinion about whether artificial, synthetic, potentially poisonous stuff is put into your body. You may say the immune system, which we've had for hundreds of thousands of years, has actually developed and is far better at coping with whatever pathogens there might be in the air. But the government might not want you to express that because they may have their own agenda. And so the online safety bill, disguised as being the very safe and useful thing so that, you're not given the wrong information, may actually mean that people who are flagging up problems get shut down. It's censorship by any other means. Because why would you need it?
Indeed, absolutely. What does Mr. Andrew Bridgen MP, who I think you've had on your show before,
yes,
what does he have to say about the online safety bill? Anything?
Well, I don't know specifically because he mainly deals with the pandemic situation and harms that have happened thanks to a certain medical intervention. But I would imagine, having spoken to him personally and listened to his speeches, that he is very much against censorship in this way, because he is now effectively an outlaw, if you like, in terms of Parliament, because nobody will listen to him within government, and he's a right thorn in their side, trying to have a difference of opinion based on facts that he presents, and he's being shut down everywhere, you know, as often as he can, as often as they can, although more and more people are siding with him, because why can't you see the other side? Why won't people discuss the opposite to the mainstream narrative? So I imagine, and I can't speak for him, of course, that he would be against anything that curtails an open and honest debate.
It's almost got the impression that it's like a Trojan horse thing, where online safety, yes, everybody wants the things that it's pretending to protect, and it will, all those risks and harms, but the things that it's going to stop at the same time, it's a Trojan horse is the best way of describing it.
Oh, I mean, I totally agree. It's been, it has, you know, there's no doubt in my mind, and it's only an opinion, there's no doubt in my mind that the whole reason you've got this is under the disguise of one thing, as you say, a Trojan horse, when actually hidden within that are the bars to prevent a lot of people trying to speak truth and alert people to things that they ought to know.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to Mr. Bridgen and yourself and Mr. Oliver, there are also characters like Mr. Lawrence Fox, who's with Andrew Bridgen in the Reclaim Party, of course, who's been he's furiously individualistic in the sense of going against the team world, which is how it's all been described by Lewis Schaefer, the comedian, in a really interesting way. He calls it team world against individual or the nation state. Do you agree with that definition of what's going on here?
Well, I would certainly say that we need more individual people to be able to speak out independently. And I think Lawrence Fox is somebody who does that himself. And I mean, I'm self-employed. I've been self-employed most of my life. So I've never lived under the hierarchy of managers or line managers or all that sort of nonsense. Or I've never had a HR department to you know, deal with my, I don't know what they deal with really, all that sort of nonsense. I've had to do it myself, which means when you're an independent person, you think if you're a self-employed man or woman, you have to live on your wits. You have to use common sense and critical thinking. You have to think about things, what logically will work. You've got nobody saying you've got to do this because this is the targets or this is the policy of the company, and you mustn't have your own thoughts about it, because if you do, or if you challenge things, you're out. But politics, it seems to me, and television programs or the hierarchy of televisions is all about and it's all about a corporation who has their mission statement and their policies, and if you don't adhere to those, then you're either chastised or you're on your, and if you still won't obey, you know, you're let go, you're released. But I think we need more independent voices. People have, you know, we're individuals at the end of the day. We're not all employees of dead entity corporations. Mm-hmm. Not all of us, some of us.
Not yet.
No, but it's going. I mean, I'm sure they would like us to all be under the thumb and agree to their policies, just as government wants us to agree to their policies. You know, we think of law as, well, we think of legislation, let me correct myself, legislation, acts and statutes as being law, but it's not. They're just policies. It's a policy that we are told we have to accept, but it's legislation. It's not law. It's not law in the true sense of law.
Mm-hmm. Just recently, Mr. Elon Musk, Lord Musk, has declared that the war against woke is now over. Like the worm is turning on woke, in big inverted commas, as in, especially after the Hamas-Israel situation recently, where lots of students have been basically supporting Hamas openly, and it's caused an incredible amount of controversy, obviously, and also with the transitioning thing, which is now seems to be a much more historical story than that one. It has replaced it in terms of seriousness nearly. He says because of all this, the woke worm is turning. Do you think that's true? And do you think it applies to what you do in any way?
You see, I don't. I mean, firstly, the woke stuff. I've never really understood it because, again, it goes back to this one leg in the old world and one leg in the new world. And if anybody says to me, who is clearly a man and wants to be a woman and wants to go through some transition, that's fine. I've got no problem with them doing that. But I have a problem if they then ask me to use pronouns.
Compelled speech is the problem.
Yeah, well, they're asking me, I mean, never understood this pronoun business because on the one hand, they're saying, oh, you must refer to me as they, them, or whatever it is, whatever the pronouns they want. And I said, well, I just refer to you by your name. That's the easiest because that's your name. If I'm talking about you, I'd be talking about you to somebody else, not to you. You wouldn't say to that person who's then said, oh, can you refer to me in the third person in a plural like they? I mean, you wouldn't have that conversation with him. I might to somebody else, but that conversation I had with somebody else got nothing to do with them. I mean, it's a bonkers argument. So I never understand it. But the whole woke thing, for me, I find it laughable that people take them seriously. That's the thing. I mean, that in the old days, people would have just laughed at that and gone, oh, for goodness sake, grow up, Fine, if you want to wear a woman's frock, you want to have the sex change, that's fine. And that would be it. Let them get on with it. But the way it's like people now go, well, you have to accept it, otherwise we cancel you, we do all these things. It's like, well, surely you haven't got much confidence in what you're doing then. If you're having to do all this to everybody else to try and say, oh, we must be accepted yourself in your own standing. And, the rest of us, if we go along with it, we'll go along with it. But you can't force us to go along with it. That's not how the world is.
Right. I think that's been the problem recently of them attempting to force it in order to put through the other changes you hint towards. The other things that they're doing. This is almost a kind of to shoehorn into other things happening, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the nonsense that you get where I can't remember which service it was, train service, in which you can't say good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You now have to say good morning, customers, because it embraces everybody. Because somebody who may not be a lady or gentleman may be, I don't know which one it was, not bisexual, pansexual, one of these, or non-sexual, or sort of,
Asexual is a new one.
Asexual, bisexual, C-sexual, sectioned, whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. We have a tradition of ladies and gentlemen, on an aeroplane, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. And now it's good morning, passengers. Passengers is a catch-all, again, it's a corporate sort of phrase, isn't it? Good morning, customers. These are living men and women who are collectively assembled on your conveyance, and you're treating them with so much disrespect. They're ladies and gentlemen. Those that are not ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking to you. You can get off at the next stop. You're welcome to be on board, but don't be offended because you're not included in the traditional dialogue that we've had for donkey's years.
This is the issue with inclusivity, isn't it? Where they almost attempt to polyfill every hole that things could squeeze out of with this kind of uniform sort of terminology.
Yes. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's again, I come back to the same thing. It's ludicrous that we accept it, that we don't just go, oh, don't be silly. Of course we're not excluding people, but they're overly including people who are not there.
Very, very nicely put, exactly. Yeah, and they're very aware of that, of course. And
I would say it's a deliberate thing, isn't it? It's a deliberate thing to break down the family, to break down communication, to divide and conquer. But, it is a deliberate policy that people have had in motion for a long, long time, because for some reason, I don't know why, they seem to hate humanity and people getting on and being a cohesive, not society, that's a horrible word, a cohesive place to be.
Yeah. just before we came in, we were talking about being a citizen and the nature of that almost having either being impossible or that not being the appropriate term anymore.
Well, this is quite deep, I suppose, and difficult for people to accept. But the word citizen refers to a city. You are a person of a city if you're a citizen, which I believe citizen is a city is civitas from civis, is it, from Roman? It's a Roman construct. And
Conjugate the verb.
Conjugate, exactly. Conjugate, not the pronoun, just the verb. If anyone asks me what my pronoun, say, what are your pronouns? Say, well, I'm not worried about pronouns. It's my
Bald Explorer.
Yes, it's my verbs that are much more important. My verbs and nouns, they're more important. Just use those if you wouldn't mind. Energetic, creative, abundant,
brilliant,
opinionated, idiot. Don't mind all of those. So words now are very important because citizen means that you are a slave to the city. You are bound by the city's policies again, and not a free man or woman. And that's a very deep thing, but it's part of Roman law, which is part of the private bar guild association, which runs the courts, and is very instrumental on how jurisdiction is taken from you as a sovereign person, a sovereign man or woman, not person, because person is a... And so these are terms that are in things like the Black Laws Dictionary, which is the legal dictionary.
Black Laws Dictionary.
Black Laws Dictionary, which is a dictionary used, which is not the Oxford English Dictionary. It can change. So if I say, what is a person to you, you're going to give me a completely different a description of what a person is actually in the Black Laws Dictionary, because person can be a corporation or a company.
Right.
In the Black Laws Dictionary, but you wouldn't associate that. You would just think that a person is like a human being type thing. But even a human being in the Black Laws Dictionary, especially in an earlier edition, was a monster or a lunatic.
Really?
Yes. The law dictionary used sounds like you know what they're talking about, but because they use their own vocabulary with their own hidden meanings, the classic thing, without going into this too much, is you introduce yourself as Sean Parker, but that's not you. You may use a given name like Sean. So if I make the sound Sean, chances are you might turn and think I'm addressing you. Parker is your family name, but the government very cleverly have joined your two names, Sean and Parker, when you were born by getting your parents to put it into a birth certificate. They've registered you, given away the title, your title, to the government. This is put on a birth certificate, it's bonded, and it's floated on the stock market. It's now worth millions. You are the stock that are worth millions in a trust. I told you this was deep. And so you now believe you are Sean Parker, and every document you get that's official will be in capitalisation. On your passport, on the bills that you get, the council tax, your inland revenue, whatever it is, you'll be in capitalisation. And you think that's you. But it's not you, because this is you, not words on a page. But in acts and statutes, they get you to act as this, what's called the legal fiction. It's a fiction, it's made up, it's not you. You're here, you're living, breathing, you've got blood, skin, legs and bones. This is just like the name, a trademark name of a company that they want you to be so that you can respond to it. This is
Sean Parker PLC.
Yeah, it could be. Well, you're not publicly liable, you're a private person. this is quite deep, and this is, I mean, some of the stuff like this is being slowly exposed. But that's so. For example, when you go into say you haven't paid your parking ticket for some reason, or you haven't paid your council tax, and you had a summons, which again in the Black Laws Dictionary is really just an invitation. It's just an invitation. It's not actually summoning the dead, as people think of it. It's not you have to go to court. You can rebut that and say, actually, I rebut it. I don't have to go. You assume I will. But when you go into court, they have to get jurisdiction from you because they want to deal with this legal fiction called Sean Parker. But you're a living man with a given name, Sean. That's true. And a family name, Parker. But they want you to deal with this pretend character on a bit of paper. And if they can't, then they're in trouble because you, believe it or not, are the executor of the trust that was set up when you were born, this estate that follows you around. But they don't want you to be that. They want you to be the trustee because that means you have to pay and settle all the bills. And if you claim that you're the executor of the estate and the sole beneficiary, there's only 3 positions in a trust. It means the judge and the court is the trustee. So they have to pay, and they don't want to pay. So they say to you, please state your name. And if you say, I'm Sean Parker, they've got you.
Right.
But if you say, I'm a living man, and I'm Sean from the family of, you've buggered their system. It's very deep. It's complicated. People will be listening to me and thinking I'm a complete nut. Check out the channel. We're doing videos on this to try and correct what. It's a fraud. It's a fraudulent system, and they have you.
So that kind of goes back into ancient England, ancient in the terms of old English law and things like that, and English language. But the postmodernists will say, well, it's all changed now, and all that's irrelevant because that's patriarchy or something, or it's just old, so it's irrelevant. How do you respond to them to say that I don't care about your kind of irrelevance, or do you respond to them?
The ground they walk on is old. It's not irrelevant, is it? Because if the ground was irrelevant, it was no longer there, they would be walking on thin air. So just because something's old, it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It may not be right. That's different. It may not be right, but they would need to change it, and clearly they want to change it. But I think the feminists, well, I don't want to say anything. I think, let me start that a sentence again. I think some people who may call themselves feminists misunderstand what men and women are in terms of, certainly historically, for hundreds of thousands of years, as man has evolved. Man has a set of skills that he brings to a relationship, let's say, so that you can procreate. And a woman will bring her set of skills, very different. And that's why they work together so well. A man and a woman can create a baby. It would be a shame that you have to then go to, say, a factory to have a baby. And I appreciate that some women can't have babies, and we have sort of ways to deal with that, with sperm donation and IVF and things like that, of course. But that no one would expect that to be the norm, or you can just make men irrelevant now because basically we can take sperm and do stuff with it. I mean, it's nonsense.
There's a conspiracy theory which goes with.
Does it?
And I'm not even commenting on it, but the idea of you can erase all that problematic men stuff and just have IVF.
Yeah, well, what kind of a world would you have without men? I mean, women might go, well, it would be fantastic. We wouldn't have all that toxic masculinity. But who really is going to be working on the oil rigs? And who's going to be the one that starts duffing up the real strong, nasty people in this world? You do need men for certain things, just as you need women, and they balance each other out. And men have a female brain as much as a male brain, and women have a male brain as much as a female brain. There's the yin and yang, isn't there?
There's supposed to be harmony going on, isn't there? And we've very much lost that.
Yes, and the sad part is that what a lot of these people who feel that they are doing the right thing and balancing imbalances do not realise that actually all of this has been manipulated. The imbalance to begin with, so that they can come and balance it, but they overbalance it. But all of it has been manipulated from the start.
That's so interesting. So you think that the culture war stuff is almost irrelevant because it's already been manipulated somewhere else. There's a third party which they're not even talking about in terms.
They don't. No, of course they're all. I mean, we're all being played. Mm-hmm. We're all, and I think some people are beginning to wake up to this and realizing that we're all being. Those things that people are very, very passionate about think that it's this problem, when the problem is very much unseen. Mm.
The original problem.
The original problem is this old boy behind the curtains in the Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the person with the power is not the one you ever see. It's all being manipulated elsewhere. And so you've got all these different groups that are Antifa, for example, and Black Lives Matter, and all these people who are very passionate about what they're doing, or the Just Stop Oil. They're all very passionate about, and they have absolutely all the logical arguments in their heads why they should be doing what they're doing and what it's about. And so from that perspective, it's true. But there's somebody else pulling the strings, and they can't see it. Some of them may be aware that it's not quite right. You know, those Just Stop Oil people sitting in the road, stopping people from going about their business, claiming they're saving the children of the future. Never mind the poor children who need to get to school to have an education, although actually I would stop children going to school to have an education anyway, because that's all wrong, but let's not worry about that. Or the doctors and nurses that need to get to work in order to carry out the important operations for somebody who's been waiting for 3 years for a hip replacement or a brain surgery or something, who may or may not last another couple of weeks if they don't, in other words, these people have their laudable logic, but they can't see that actually they're trying to save something for a future which may or may not come, when the present danger is they're just stopping. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is bonkers, but they can't see it because they've been hypnotized, they've been brainwashed, and they'll think that somebody like me saying this is completely wrong and should be shut up. And it's an opinion. That's all it is. I'm not, some of it, most of it, I try to make fact based, and I may get things wrong. It's an opinion, and everybody's opinion, no matter how awful, ought to be heard, so that you can dismiss it. Let people have enough rope so they can hang themselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, to some people, I've hung myself. They said, "Oh my God, that Richard Vobes, he's so opinionated. You mustn't listen to him." But you need extremes of opinion to be able to, from this side to that side, to find something in the middle, don't you?
You keep coming back anyway, so
yeah.
Probably that effect. You're an extremely successful public speaker now in this way. I know you hate praise. I'm not going to do too much of it onto you.
I wouldn't say extremely successful. I managed to cobble together a few videos that people sometimes watch.
It's going very nicely, and you do some public speaking as well out there in the flesh.
Yes.
There's an election next year in 2024, but I know you're going to say there's no point in me standing for Labour, for any party in Britain, here on the Sussex coast, for example, aren't you? But maybe you'd like to
stand in an election.
Tell me why not.
My humble opinion is quite simply that we've come to the end of government in the way that we have government, with a two-party system, with the Houses of Parliament, with us voting for parties that do nothing. And at the moment, you've got two main parties. There's a fag paper difference between the two. If you vote for Tory, you'll get more of the same control and tyrannical government dictating, giving you anti-human policies that you never asked for, never wanted. And if you vote for Labour, you'll get that and more. and with a bit of communism thrown in there as well. That's my opinion, and people may disagree with that. But I just think that system is not fair for men and women of this country. It's not. Also, if you vote, you're a slave. If you vote for something, you're saying, please, please, I want this person. A sovereign person, a person who has standing and can stand their ground and knows who they are, will elect. They won't vote. Vote is a subservient thing. You elect people. I elect this person because I believe in them and I bring them to power. You don't vote for them. Voting is for the dogs. I think the system is fraudulent in and of itself. Government are corporations. They're for businesses. They're not what you think. The council is not what you think. They're registered on Dun and Bradstreet. They are there for profit. They have policies, not laws. We're all told that we have to follow their policies, but you don't have to follow any of them if you don't consent, but they trick you into the consent. We give away our title. Well, when you vote, you've got to register to vote. So you give away your title, your power, you give it away. Say, yes, I'll vote, I'll be part of the system. Don't. Get out of it. I'm just as guilty. I've voted all my life and I've now woken up and realised this system is wrong. So I don't think there's any point. Now, I'm not saying the principle is wrong, that you would have, say, people helping and representing members of your environment, the town that you live in. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying parties, political parties, as it's set up at the moment, is a waste of time because they're all corrupt. They're all fraudulent. They're all there to get money and increase their own personal ideals, and they're not really serving. Some people go into it innocently trying to do stuff, but the majority of them can't.
So we're not going to see you on the hustings next year, probably?
No, never.
So if just to a quick one though, if you were the Prime Minister for not for a day, for a year, what would you actually do? I mean, it's a stupidly difficult question, but what would you bring in if you didn't have to negotiate it through 1 million people?
If you had that power, I don't think the Prime Minister has a lot of power because you've got the civil service who are also just as...
You can be an authoritarian president. What would you do?
Right.
Let's check them out.
Well, in that case, I would dissolve Parliament.
Right.
I would dissolve the whole process and I would start again, probably with something along what the Saxons did back in the day, in which you would go to your elders, not your elderly, because that's a horrible term. The elderly, it sounds like old, crippled, useless, well past their sell-by date. But if you talk to people who are elders, that sounds more like that these are people who've been around a long time, lived a bit, perhaps in the old analog world, and they've got wisdom, they've got knowledge, they've got information, they've got ideas. Your elders, you've just by using, that's why I think words are so incredibly powerful. If you talk to your elders and you elected elders who have had some time in this world and have had time to think, they're towards the end of their life, so they're not looking for a career. They're thinking about what would be great for the grandchildren, the generation down. What should we do? How do we make life more human? And the Saxons used to meet on what are called these moot mounds, M-O-O-T, moot mounds, and would elect, not vote, would elect somebody to, say, like the kings, a king in the Saxon times, to run perhaps the country, but also these people would run the locality. You wouldn't have this stupid idea of MPs who, as we see now, you go and write, and I know this from people writing to the MPs, and they show the letters and say, I'm very concerned about this particular medical intervention, and the MP going, well, we're not worried about that, safe and effective, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm not going to raise your thing. If everybody should be included if they've got worries, and should be being able to, if your representative is not representing you, what's the point of them? And so smaller governments, smaller, local, everything should be smaller and local. That's what I would change. Instead of big central office saying one size fits all, we'll sell your sovereignty to the WHO and all of that. So
if we did have that, which is a term for it which escapes me now, but it's some kind of an agrarian, not communism, but sort of a communal thing from the old school, isn't it? How would you get the national cohesion after that, like a sense of Britishness, which is hard enough to get with devolution and things like that?
Well, I not really understanding what Britishness is. I'm English. Somebody else might be Welsh or Scottish or whatever country they come from. So I'm a nationalist. I believe in nations. I think that you have to have some form of nation because, particularly here, we're living on an island, and it's a relatively small island. So you still have to have some sense of who you are based on your customs and traditions. And I think that just comes. I mean, you only have to go back in time a little bit and see how people travel around England, and some things which you think are the same are very different. Accents, for example, food was very different, and yet collectively it's all part of England, let's say, and you might have dates in the diary that you used to have, such as May Day dancing and certain old customs that based on farming and things like that, based on the seasons and things. That's where your cohesion comes from, not made up rubbish by people who just want to change the I'm trying to think of a different word than society, because that's another difficult word, than the people of the land, willy-nilly, just because they've got their own little policy of, they need to wear a dress in the winter and a dildo at night. I mean, I don't know, whatever because they've got their own warped diversity. Yeah, this nonsense. Diversity is another sort of old nonsense, because we have diversity. The thing that they don't want is diversity of thought. If you have a different idea, say, diversity is this and diversity, well, all right, how about thinking different? Oh, no, you've all got to think the same. We've all got to have this one system.
We don't mean that kind of diversity.
No, yeah, so it's like pick and choose your diversity. It's like, oh, for goodness sake, make your bloody mind up.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. I think that's probably enough for your wonderful audience, or both of our audiences.
See, just coming across like some old codger. And that is the beauty of getting old.
I think you should be an MP, but I don't think that you're going to have it. So,
what would be the point? What would be the point?
To tell them this, maybe in the House. But
I think the problem with the system we have, just to quickly finish up with, it's like a tree that is rotten to the core. It doesn't matter how much you try and put fertilizer on it or new blood into it. It's so rotten, it's collapsing.
To go to another tree.
You need another tree, and that's what I mean. You just need another kind of administration, or another way of governing people or caring for people.
Thank you for that fantastic little trip through the world of Richard Vobes for half an hour or so.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me on your show.